Media freedom groups are raising the alarm over the 17 new charges filed against Julian Assange by the U.S. Department of Justice. Activists say this sets a dangerous precedent where a journalist can be criminally prosecuted for publishing truthful information, with some going as far as to claim the U.S. has declared war on journalism.
Any government use of the Espionage Act to criminalise the receipt and publication of classified information poses a dire threat to journalists seeking to publish such information in the public interest, irrespective of the Justice Department's assertion that Assange is not a journalist.
This is an extraordinary escalation of the Trump administration's attacks on journalism and a direct assault on the First Amendment.
Live now to RT's Polly Boyka for more on the charges against Assange. Polly, we've just heard some of the reaction. What other concerns are being raised at this point?
Well, look, ever since he was dragged out of the Ecuadorian embassy here in London last month, he's had this US extradition request slapped on him, and it had listed a single count of conspiracy to hack a government computer, which carries a fairly minor sentence of 5 years behind bars. But that has been padded out substantially now by Washington. The charges against him now list 17 counts of violating the Espionage Act. And press freedom groups, journalists, whistleblowers, various organizations from across the ideological spectrum have condemned this escalation of the case against Julian Assange. Take a listen.
The espionage indictment of Assange for publishing is an extremely dangerous frontal attack on the free press. Bad, bad, bad.
The Department of Justice just declared war, not on WikiLeaks, but on journalism itself. This is no longer about Julian Assange. This case will decide the future of media.
This is madness. It is the end of national security journalism and the First Amendment.
Well, the additional 17 charges heaped on Assange each carry a maximum of a 10-year sentence, which means that his eventual sentence could be 175 years in prison. Julian Assange has been charged under the US Espionage Act, which dates back to 1917. That's First World War days. And so far, it's only ever been used against government officials who disclosed secret information. It was never used to charge journalists who publish those secret documents. And Assange, the WikiLeaks team, and of course Assange's loyal supporters have always argued that he's always only ever acted as a journalist, and his activities as the editor or former editor of WikiLeaks have only ever been in a journalistic capacity, which is something that the Department of Justice in Washington refuses to acknowledge. And they say that Assange has revealed the names of military informants in war zones and thus put their lives at risk. Take a listen.
The superseding indictment alleges that Assange was complicit with Chelsea Manning, a former intelligence analyst in the U.S. Army, in unlawfully obtaining and disclosing classified documents related to the national defense.
Well, you heard there, all of this is very much linked to Chelsea Manning. And of course, Chelsea Manning is the former US Marine who leaked Assange, the now notorious Iraq war logs. And Manning was sentenced to 35 years in prison, but was then pardoned by then President Barack Obama back in 2017. But she's now been subpoenaed to testify against Assange, which she apparently refused to do, saying she accepts full responsibility for the leaks herself. So she's back in custody for refusing to testify against Assange. And this whole saga really kind of entered its new, very convoluted legal phase last month when Assange was dragged out against his will from London's Ecuadorian embassy. The Ecuadorian authorities revoked his claim to political asylum, and they allowed British police to go inside, quite an unprecedented move really, and arrest him. And he's now serving out a 50-week sentence in a London prison. He's also wanted in Sweden. Stockholm is about to go through the motions of issuing filing their own extradition request to get him to Sweden because they want him to answer questions about an alleged sexual assault dating back to 2010, the very same sexual assault that led him to seek asylum in London's Ecuadorian embassy in 2012. So we've kind of gone full circle here. Of course, he went into the Ecuadorian embassy in London under fears that he'd be extradited on to the US if he were to go to Sweden. And here we are with a slew of charges against him, these 17 new counts hanging over him now from Washington. And I think what's interesting here is that Assange is a very Marmite character. He's very divisive. There are some people who are more keen to see him as a hacker rather than a hero of sort of epic journalistic proportions. And yet, even those that don't support him have come out now and said, wow, this padded out, more serious case against Assange from the US authorities is very heavy-handed.
Polly Boyko bringing us the latest from London. Thank you. To remind you, here are some of the bigger revelations made by Assange over the years. Back in 2010, thousands of documents and classified video related to the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan were made public. That leak detailed, among other things, indiscriminate shooting of civilians in Iraq. A year later, the so-called Gitmo files revealed routine torture at the Guantanamo Bay camp and inmate deaths resulting from harsh treatment. In 2016, WikiLeaks revealed a pro-Clinton media bias during the presidential campaign and a plot to push Bernie Sanders out of the race. Political activist Kevin Zeese says Washington's taking revenge on Assange.
I think a lot of reasons why they haven't done this in the past is because Assange was democratizing the media. He was broadening the people who could report. People inside government, inside corporations could leak classified documents anonymously. They want to frighten the media into not covering U.S. activity around the world. The U.S. is often involved in activity that could be characterized as war crimes, certainly atrocities, and certainly often corruption of our transnational corporations. That was all the kind of thing that WikiLeaks was reporting. And they obviously offended. WikiLeaks obviously offended the United States by challenging the military industrial intelligence complex here, and they want revenge, and they want to send a message to any other journalist who tries to expose.
There's more than one case of whistleblowers in the U.S. being punished for media leaks. A former FBI agent, Terry Albury, leaked classified data on how the Bureau recruits informants, for which he got a 4-year sentence. Reality Winner was working as an NSA contractor when she leaked top-secret information on the alleged Russian interference. She received 63 months behind bars. And John Kiriakou disclosed details of the CIA's torture program and was sentenced for 2.5 years. Here's what he thinks about Julian Assange's future.
I think that they're going to try to make an example of Julian. He's been charged in the Eastern District of Virginia, and his judge was also my judge, and Ed Snowden's judge, and Jeffrey Sterling's judge, who reserves every national security case for herself. She's a hanging judge. She will not give him a fair trial. It will be impossible for Julian to receive a fair trial in the Eastern District of Virginia. So I think that they're going to try to extradite him as quickly as possible, and they're going to try to give him as many years as they possibly can. The point is to frighten everybody to the point where they don't dare compromise something that might even possibly be classified. This is meant to create a chilling effect all across the media, not just among Americans, but everybody around the world.